before you get.
This meeting is being recorded.
Well, I agree with him.
Why? Who are we agreeing with?
Diana's former husband who didn't let people eat in the car.
The children,
Oh, then I have to take that back because our
I thought
car,
you might.
we have too many kids and a 4-hour trip to New York.
They have to eat.
We don't have much of a choice.
I know, but it doesn't matter.
Give me one moment, everybody. I'm sorry. Carry on, carry on.
Okay.
But what other problem of major importance can we solve? Can we create world peace in 2 minutes?
In 2 minutes, it would be nice. Well, I was very surprised about the rabbi, actually, our rabbi here, mentioning some things about what's going on. And I was in the kitchen with Nakami and somebody else. I can't think of who it was now. Let me think. It doesn't matter. And we were talking, about how anybody who's Jewish would vote, for this new administration. And everybody has their own way of thinking, that's all. So you just have to be, somebody came in and said, you shouldn't be talking politics here in the synagogue. Like, once we leave, we're going to have a different thing of thinking, It's okay for everybody to have and think the way they want to. I mean, that's why we live in America, I think, anyway. And but it does make me feel like, how could somebody think that way? When you think of your way and what's going on and what's happening, and they think their way, that's all. That's what we want to be, free.
I agree. What are we talking about?
We're talking about that time you had that somebody gave you a MAGA hat. Remember that time?
Yes, yes.
Oh,
I'll tell you. You know what? Uh, here's regarding the politics, et cetera, et cetera. I feel that for the most part, all of us spend a large chunk of our potentially very productive time on things that we opine on, and maybe in a certain way we have our ability to make a impact with either people that we speak to or their votes, etc., etc. But we definitely spend an exorbitant amount of time, significantly more than would be considered productive. And I, for one, have tried to wean myself off of the daily news cycle.
Oh, my husband, Bert too. He wasn't sleeping all night. And he said the last 3 nights we didn't have the TV on. We didn't talk about that. We have a puzzle we're doing. And he said he slept through the night for the first time in a long, long time. So I think that you're right.
Definitely, puzzles are way better. Way better. Solve puzzles that you can solve. No, I just think that again, um, to a certain degree, uh, uh, the very nature of the of politics and the news cycle as it is right now is so toxic that you can't consider it. We cannot consider it. Say, okay, so look, it's just going to be something I'm paying attention to. Look, I need to stay informed, etc. It has a deleterious effect on your spirit. It has a deleterious effect on relationships that you have with people that have different viewpoints, etc., etc. It no longer falls under the general category of, okay, it's a part of or it's obviously on something that you that is a necessity in order to make important decisions, and there's definitely an element of following the news cycle to make decisions, but then but there's a cost to it. Also, nowadays there's a greater cost than perhaps it used to have, with the rancor and the angst and the vitriol and the hate that is being slung this way and that way.
Mhm.
That I think that's my main point. We have to enter into this and understand that to whatever necessity there is, and there is, I'm not going to take away from it. There is a certain amount of necessity to the whole politics and following the news and all these things, but there is definitely a cost. There's definitely a cost, and because there's a cost, you have to be cognizant about the amount of time you're going to give to this and whether you're getting a decent return on that investment. And I think all of us could agree that paying a little less attention to the news, a little bit more attention to Torah study, time with family, puzzles, all that would probably be a healthier balance, because it's even, I will say, even with Israel, somebody uh, shared with me one of these memes, one of these one-liners, says you could either read the um, the front page of a newspaper and be informed about what was, or you can read a page of Tehillim and impact what will be.
Mm.
Mm,
So what's a better use of our time? And that's the
the
thing. We only have a certain,
The Psalms,
yeah,
Diane.
Tehillim is Psalms, but basically that that's let's it's all consuming. We never had news cycles like this, or we never had news consumption like this. You had between 8 to 10 o'clock or whatever it is, your date with Walter Cronkite, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And what have you in the earlier days of this, and then maybe you were listening to the news in your car, and then also the what nowadays with the smartphones you can't escape it, and it's not a very healthy way to exist. I because I spent I'm speaking just with the particular passion on it, because my sister and I were driving home from New York from a bris uh, 2 days ago, Tuesday, and this is my sister who lives in California, and we have precious little time together. And half the car was gone, and we realized that we were just talking about politics and Israel and the elections and Trump, and we both kind of looked at each other and said, "This is not what we want. Why?
Mm.
We're not going to be spending this kind of time together. We had 4 hours of quality time, and this is not really, and why? Because the conversation 2 hours into the car ride, and we were miserable because honestly, the news cycle is pretty darn miserable. It's just not
Right.
very not there's not that much in the way of positive news. So maybe you could call it escaping, but I don't think it's escaping. I think most importantly, it's just what makes us miserable about it is not so much of the doom and gloom, and it's a little bit what I was mentioning on Shabbos, which was the theme about lo sachmod, about the very last of the Ten Commandments seems to be puzzling in the fact that it doesn't
Don't
seem to
covet.
be as right. Don't covet. Yeah, don't be jealous or don't covet. And it seems to be a strange one when you have kind of the I am God, your God, and don't kill, and then you have don't covet, don't be jealous. It's like something that's the little white sin that we're all guilty of, right? Everybody's looking over into the neighbor's yard, etc. How is it in the top 10 of things that Judaism is founded on? And it said that today we are living in such a blessed time. If you objectively, by any metric, how you measure, you would realize that we are living in such a blessed point in history. The billions and billions, maybe even trillions of souls that have come to the world, there has never been a luckier bunch of souls as those born into this generation. A generation where you'll expect to live 7 decades or more, right? Where you expect that that none of your children will die in your lifetime. You expect that people around the world will not be imprisoned and enslaved.
I think that's one of the things
Right.
that's wrong is that we all have now, like you mentioned about the phone, we have the whole world that we're getting hit by. You know, before we had local news, so to speak, you know, American news, what was going on in our country. Now we have it, the whole world is on our shoulder.
Well, you know, for those who grew up during World War II, we certainly had world news. I mean, we knew.
No, but
That was,
put it this way, we could also be taking in the fact that the world is all in a good place. Why does that even? Why does that have to? If we expand the scope, we should be appreciating how good it is all over the world. Because again,
Because of clicks. There isn't any, nobody is going
I
to read an
think no,
article about
but
somebody did not get murdered today.
right,
Okay,
but I don't.
nobody's
Right,
going to read that.
correct, correct. There's a bias towards, but to a certain degree, even about forget about the news. But why is a person in general not a happier human being, even though they're living in such kind of riches? Um, that again, could you imagine? Kings, no king could walk into a room and say, I want it exactly 72 degrees, not 73, not 71, 72 degrees. I want a pineapple in winter, right?
yeah.
The way we live today, I want to again no the infant mortality is really is a shocking news story when it happens. Otherwise, there's what used to be a a true fact of life has become nearly nearly a non-factor. The way we live and the wealth with which we live, the medicines that we have, the comforts that we all have. You know, people who lived back in the day, even if you were wealthy, who lived with every kid in their own bedroom, right? In a bed, with a feathered duvet, and things like we are living in ways that no other time in humanity have lived, but we're not objectively happier. And whatever, without going into all of it, it is throughout the point that this is because we are spend less time looking at what we have and more time looking at what that other person has that we feel like we deserve to have, we should have, and it's the angst and it's the jealousy and the covetousness of the nature and this Facebook syndrome. It's like they're posting, everybody posts, nobody posts their flat tire on Facebook. Everybody posts, you know, when they're having, you know, the great day and a yummy piece of cheesecake that you wish you could have, and they're taking a picture of it, and you know, or they're at the beach, and all these kind of things. And nobody's living their Facebook life. Everybody's living their regular life. But you don't put all of that on Facebook, and you spend your whole time looking at all the wonderful things everybody's doing. And usually you're not doing it while you're sitting on the beach, because when you're sitting on the beach, you don't have time, or at least you don't have time to be going through somebody else's Facebook. You're too busy posting your pictures of how good your life is on Facebook. So usually you're following Facebook when you're sitting at home, probably doing something else that you're supposed to be doing, and then you're looking at it's the problem is that we have so much to be thankful for, so much to be happy for. Really, really, we all do. And we are too busy allowing our attention to be pulled away towards the problems that exist, and they do. And there should be time that we devote to that, etc. But we need to make sure we are maintaining a healthy balance of also focusing on all the wonderful things and also focusing on, and especially focus on where we can be a source of positive impact. And so, without further ado, we will turn to learning Torah, which is definitely a place where we are engaged in positive and a
That's
positive
why
pursuits
we're here.
and having positive impacts. Yes.
Good, I'm
So
excited.
Parshas Eikev, right? Parashat Eikev. This we've talked about this, and I'm going to do something that might sound disingenuous, but I got it from the Rebbe. The whole Parshat Bamidbar, the whole book of Bamidbar, rather, I was pointing out how absolutely key and important the book of Bamidbar is. One can make an argument that it's the most important book of the Torah. But I'm going to now make an argument that the book of Devarim is the most important book of the Torah. Or
I could see
one
that.
could make an argument that the book of Devarim, why? Because what Moshe Rabbeinu is doing here in the book of Devarim is recapping all the events, but importantly, he's editorializing the news. Right? Moshe Rabbeinu is now a columnist, right? He's saying, this is what happened, and here's what we need to learn from it. Here are the takeaways. And there is the philosophic points that are in the book of Devarim are the touchstones of Judaism, the touchstones of morality and ethics, etc., that are eternal, that humanity has lived by since the giving of the Torah, and that we, the Jewish people, need to be the bastions and ambassadors of. Really, it is hard to really to give only a week to each of the parshiot of the book of Devarim. There's so much, and Moshe is very clearly talking to us. And by us, I don't mean Jewish people. Us, I mean me and you in the year 2024. It is like, Moshe, how do you know me? And how do you know what I'm dealing with? And how do you know what the issues of the day are, etc., etc.? Moshe, this is not, and that is what we said is the difference between a classic work and an eternal work. It's a book that is a classic, right? Written a long time ago, but is still being read, is because it has, quote unquote, stood the test of time, and its message remains relevant even in today's day and age, right? So whatever classic, you're talking Charles Dickens, Mark Twain, whoever, pick your author, pick their books, etc., and they're classics because in their storytelling or in the messages of the storytelling, there's still a relevancy. But the idea that you say that there's still a relevancy, that itself is the key difference between a classic and something that is eternal. The Torah is not a classic, and I therefore reject when people refer to scripture as the classic texts.
Right, or the classical
Right.
biblical literature.
The classic, no, not a classic. It's incorrect. It's an incorrect description. Because a classic is something written in a particular time period by a fallible human being that somehow was such a visionary or whatever it is that they managed to span a greater scope of time with their work than most people were able, and it is a truly masterful triumph. Eternal means that time and the march of it doesn't apply at all. to the relevancy of the message. The Torah was written for the year 2024 just as much as it was written for the time period in which it was originally given. In the year 2448 of the Jewish calendar. The Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu is talking to us as much as he was talking to the generation that was about to enter into the land of Israel. It is the same messages, and it is all the more apparent when you get to the book of Devarim. Parsha Ve'et Chanan that we had last week. So much, such a dense parsha. Every line in there was another one of those classic lines that defines all of Judaism. V'atem hadvekim b'Hashem Elokechem chaim kolchem hayom. V'yadata hayom v'hashivot alavecha ki Hashem hu Elokim b'shamayim. All these lines that we all know, they're just line after line of the book of I mean, in the Parshat V'etchanan, it's like every line is a line you're familiar with that carries through Parshat Eikev. It will carry through Parshat Re'eh. It's just going to be like this, where such classics. There you go. I used that term. But using it in a little bit of a different context.
Fair enough.
The lines that really have become such iconic lines in Yiddishkeit.
So fundamental.
Yeah.
Question.
Are yes. And so I'm not just going to talk generally, we're going to get into something specific, but go ahead, Paul.
I'm glad, because that's what my question is. When we talk about Torah, Chumash, in this case being eternal, I wonder about things like the difference between Ava and Yira. It's certain, you're smiling because you're going to talk about it, so I'm not going to say anything. You know what I'm going to ask.
Well, I don't know what you're going to ask, but it happens to be that of all the many subjects that we were going to tackle, that was going to be that we could have potentially tackled in this parsha. We're going, Ava and Yira is going to be, but go ahead, ask your question. So I want to make sure that
My question was small. I think you're going to take it larger, so I'd rather hear from you. But it was whether you think that these two concepts, and for Ahava is love, Yira is, quote, fear, unquote. Let's keep it simple. If for the time that Moshe was living in, those concepts may have had a different meaning than they do for us, and will perhaps for generations in the future. Yes, it's eternal, but does your circumstance, your time limit how you deal with it?
So yes, we're going to address that point in 1 second. Hi, Nancy. I am very, very good. Thank you for returning my call. Nancy, I'm in the middle of giving the Thursday afternoon class. Can I call you back in about half an hour?
I have extreme jet lag, so whatever.
Right. No, I figured. That's what I appreciate, especially that you did call me back. So let me call you back in a half an hour, if that's okay.
Okay.
All right. Welcome back. Welcome back. So so let's jump straight in, because we will address this. The beginning of the Aliyah, actually, that corresponds with today. What I mean by the Aliyah that corresponds with today is that there are 7 days of a week, and there are 7 Aliyot. And the Alter Rebbe says you got to live with the times. The Alter Rebbe says you got to live with the times. You got to be up with the times, ladies and gentlemen. You got to be well informed and be up with the latest news of the times. But darf leben mit der Zeit, says the Alter Rebbe. You got it in Yiddish. And what the Alter Rebbe meant was that you have to make sure to buy the daily copy of the New York Times.
I think not.
Yeah. All right. Okay. We'll change what. No, what he meant is living with Parshat HaShavua, and specifically the idea that every single day of the week you read the Aliyah associated with that day, and you
Yeah.
look at it as you
Yeah.
are, in fact, reading today's newspaper. Same idea. The Torah is eternal. So the fifth Aliyah of Parshat Eikev is the most relevant front page news that you can read today. Can you imagine if more people lived their life that way? I promise you the world would be a far more productive place. So pretty sure there's a solid argument to be made that that's not a quaint idea, but it actually would be a wonderfully practical piece of advice. If people spent, instead of reading the front page of whatever news website you go to, you read the Parshat, the Aliyah that corresponds with Parshat HaShavua. So this Aliyah begins and is a very famous question, philosophical question that Moshe poses to the Jewish people. And it is a rhetorical question. A rhetorical question. A question where Moshe himself asks, but then immediately gives the answer. Here is the question. Va'ata Yisrael. And now, O Israel, Ma Hashem Elokecha shoel mi'imach. What is it that Hashem is really asking you? Ki'im, only that to fear him, to go in all his ways, and to love him, and to serve him with all your heart and all your soul. That's God's asking of you. What's he really asking of you? Right? He's just asking you to fear him and to love him and serve him with all your heart and soul. Right? Easy peasy.
And you
Right?
can't see him.
Right. Whatever he is, whatever he is, you have to love him with all your heart and soul.
That's it. Easy stuff. Easy stuff. So me and you read that, right? And you're like, you start shrinking in your chair a little bit. What was this? Is that supposed to be easy? Like, am I missing something? Am I just a horrible, terrible, like, right? It's like the practical joke that sometimes, the newbie gets played on the newbie, right? Whereas like guy comes in and says, "Okay, guys, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do this, this, that, and everybody's like, yeah, okay, easy." And the guy's looking around like, "What?" It's like the Parsha, the Torah of truth is saying this. And I think me and you, among others, and that's why I say, Paula, I think this is why, right, we're kind of aligned. Your question and the focus is aligned because was it different in the past? Was when Moshe said it to the people, were they all like, "Yeah, Moshe, we get you, easy stuff. Yeah, the easy stuff. To love God with all your heart and all your soul, to fear God with all your heart and soul, and to serve God with all your heart and soul. Easy." So let me give you some solace. Let me give you some solace. The Talmud quotes this. The Talmud, okay? So another period of great individuals in history.
Eternal,
Talmud,
not classic.
right. And the Talmud, the fellow who quotes it says, "V'atam yira milsa zutrasahi." Is the fear of heaven really such a small matter?
Is the
Like,
fear what?
of heaven, so really such a In other words, somebody's asking what we're all thinking, right? Somebody's, somebody's actually, putting it out there. Moshe, and not just Moshe, but God, that ain't easy stuff. That really isn't easy. Like, how do you, to the Torah of truth, actually claim that this is easy? Okay. So, well, by the way, you know what the Talmud answers? Here's the helpful answer of the Torah, of the Talmud.
Keiko.
Okay, you ready? No.
Okay.
It's even more frustrating than taken. You ready for the answer of the Talmud? It is in fact. For Moshe, it's an easy thing.
Ken. Yeah. Got it.
For Moshe, it's an easy thing.
That's what it says?
Yeah. So you say, wait a minute. That Moshe is not talking to himself there, pretty sure. Right? He's not looking in a mirror. In fact, he says, Ata Yisrael. He's talking to the Jewish people. To say that Moshe, it's easy for you, right? We literally have an expression called easy for you to say, right? For Moshe, easy for you to say, but not for the rest of us. And Moshe is not talking to himself, he's talking to the rest of us. So what kind of answer is that, Talmud? Right? Now here's the thing. Even King David acknowledges that this is a little much. It's actually beautiful. This is a beautiful little exchange. King David, in a psalm that we're actually going to be beginning to recite daily, very shortly, the whole month of Elul, all the way through the holiday season, the David Hashem Ori V'ishi
Mimira.
is one of is a classic classic right there. They say God's fixing my wagon. I was critical about people who use the word, and there I had now God says you. Another one of the iconic psalms of Tehillim, and in it is the iconic phrase "Achat shu'alti meit Hashem osa avakesh," right? Shifti b'veit Hashem kol yimei chaya lachzus b'nam Hashem l'vakei v'chala. Achat shu'alti meit Hashem. One thing I ask of you, God. Shifti b'veit Hashem kol yimei chaya. I only ask for one thing, God. One thing, right? This is King David's opening salvo is about to negotiate with God. He has a request from God, and he begins, God, I have only one thing to ask. Right? When your kids, right, come over to you and say, I only have one thing I want to ask of you. Right? Buckle up. Right? Because it ain't going to be one thing. Right? Anybody who opens up with that statement, if it was really one thing, they would just say, can I have this? Somebody says, I really only have one thing I want to ask, right? Or any guy on the phone or whoever it is, not only your kids, but period. Or anybody who really opens up with that, you generally know more than one thing's coming down the pike.
Isn't that the achat sha'alti that you're talking about?
Yeah. That's it. Achat sha'alti. And King David, true to form, achat sha'alti meit Hashem. Only one thing I have to ask. Shifti b'veit Hashem. I want to live in the house of God. All the days of the life. I want to gaze on God's glory. And I want to be amongst. God says, whatever happened with that one thing? Didn't you say you were going to ask me this one thing? How did that turn into this entire Hanukkah present list over here? Right? What's going on here? You're being a little bit disingenuous
Wait,
in your
who says what's
negotiations.
going on here? Who says what's going on?
God responds to David HaMelech and says, you open up with an achat shu'alti, and then you list a whole bunch of stuff. What's going on? So King David turns around to God and says, "Mimatzah lamadati." God, I learned from you. I learned that move from you. Where? From this moment, from this place that we talked about in this week's parsha. You turn around through your spokesperson Moshe, and you say, "Shem Shalom, what's Hashem really asking of you?" Right? And then L'Yiroso, La'avoto, La'avdo, B'lev Cholavavcho, Chol Nafshech. You don't like this tactic? Then don't use it yourself. I'm just using your tactic right back against you. Right? All fine and wonderful. And we have perhaps a little bit of solace in the fact that we ain't alone in thinking that this is a lot. And it's not such a small thing. But we haven't answered the fundamental questions at all, which is, A, how is it, in fact, the Torah of truth is saying to all Jews of all generations that Ma Hashem Shalom, what in fact is God? In other words, that it is giving the implicit sense that this is supposed to be something easy. Then the Talmud asks the question on our behalf and gives us this incredibly unsatisfying answer, which says that for Moshe, that if you're a Moshe Rabbeinu, then it's easy. But that's not the rest of us. That doesn't give us an answer for the rest of us. And then King David, you also, to a certain degree, acknowledge, but what's your take on this? So how do we understand all this? And the answer actually is an entire section of time. An entire section towards the end of the first volume of Tanya. Tanya is a collection of 5 volumes. The end of the first 53 chapters, there's an entire section of it that focuses on this idea, because a lot of Tanya is focused on the love and fear of God, and acknowledges that on the one hand, it seems the Torah seems to imply that it is eminently feasible and eminently near to each and every one of us. And then on the other hand, the Talmud and other sources acknowledge that no, it's not. So which one is true? And the answer is that when the Talmud says that, yes, it is milsa zutrasa, it is an easy matter, because for Moshe, it's an easy matter, the Talmud was not saying that, easy for you to say. That's not what the Talmud is saying. The Talmud is saying that it is, in fact, easy for us because it is easy for Moshe. Why? In Yiddishkeit, in Judaism, there is a few fundamental aspects that define the structure of Judaism. Our adherence to the Torah, our love for our fellow Jew. So in other words, there is the doctrinal aspect, there is the social aspect of Judaism, and you can't really do Judaism alone. Not if you have the ability, right? There's the idea of a minyan, there's a tzedakah, there's the social aspects of Yiddishkeit that are cemented into the fabric of Yiddishkeit. And there is also built in the idea of the Raya Mehemna, the faithful shepherd. We see that Moshe Rabbeinu, or that God, in the fact that the era of Moshe Rabbeinu was closing out, God personally took a vested interest in what?
The rest of us.
In making sure that there was a Yehoshua to follow Moshe. And that was more than just having a kind of a practical executive, somebody who's going to make the necessary decisions, but there was always Navi Bikirbecha, that God, that there will be always a prophet, Elav Tishmaun, you shall listen to him or to her, whoever it is, because there is always will be a Raya Mehemna. A Raya Mehemna means a faithful shepherd, or a shepherd of faith. They're not the same thing. They're not the same translations. A Raya Mehemna implies a faithful shepherd implies that the person who will shepherd the flock, and is trustworthy. You can count on that person being there, like Old Faithful, right? It will always be there. The guys will always be spitting water, right? That's what a faithful shepherd means. Someone you can rely on being there, right? A shepherd of faith means the one who feeds you your faith, the one who will provide you and help you internalize your faith. We all know, and here's the thing, that a faith is embedded in the very fabric of our souls. Anachnu ma'aminim b'nei ma'amin. We are believers, the children of believers. It's there. It is our heritage. It is our legacy. And in theory, that should be enough. Because if God is front and center and your awareness of Him is absolute, then it shouldn't be hard at all to love and fear Him and serve Him with all your heart and soul. God is that big and that much of a presence. It's not that hard to say that the general expectation is that you love your parents, right? And you're devoted to your parents, etc., right? In fact, it's a tragedy when circumstances play out that for whatever reason, either the fault of the parent or the fault of the child, but where that relationship is not intact, right? But there is a general understanding that a parent being such a presence in the life of an individual, that there will be that devotion, that love, that awe, or whatever it is, for such a figure. So why shouldn't that apply tenfold to God? And if your awareness of God is natural, then it should. And in fact, love and awe shouldn't be difficult, like the way it is for Moshe Rabbeinu. Is it any surprise that Moshe had a great love, devotion, and awe of God? Or that would be the natural reaction of somebody in Moshe's circumstance? Right? But so why is it different for us than it is for Moshe? What do you mean, why is it different? Why, when we all heard the way the Talmud gave the answer, said, for Moshe it's easy. Like, of course for Moshe it's easy. Why should it be a course? Why is it, of course, for Moshe easy? Why did we all immediately assume that for Moshe it should be easy
Well, he saw
to have
God.
love and fear and awe of God?
He
What?
saw God. He was
He
with God.
spoke directly with
Because
God.
God is there, like there, right? God is right there. He spoke to God on a regular basis, right? He saw God. Panim el panim diber Shem Enosh, right? But that's Moshe. And that's the point. For Moshe, God is right there. For the rest of us, not so much. And as they say in Yiddish, Darten liegt der Hund vergraben. That's where the dog is buried. Don't ask me the origin of that. Probably for when they were trying to figure out why the well is poisoned or why the ground is, that's right there is, but right, that's the Yiddish expression, right? That's where. So to a certain degree, things will acknowledge that if we would have that kind of circumstance, then it would be a pretty intuitive, natural thing to have a love and awe and devotion to God. Because again, God is that big, that central, that compelling in all of our lives. We all know this. We all know this. I breathe. Every breath I take is because of God. Every blessing in my life is because of God. Right? Everything that impacts me is because of God. So, of course, that's going to should result in a healthy human being, very strong feelings about God with all my heart and soul. It doesn't, because there's all these layers of my consciousness and my reality that get in between, that veil the divine presence from my day-to-day life. Why is it easier for me to love my mother more than it is to love God? Because my mother was the one who put the bowl of Cheerios in front of me every day. The Cheerios all come from God, and ostensibly, really, truly, it's God who put the Cheerios before me. But it's my beautiful mother who put the Cheerios in front of me. It's my beautiful mother who was the one who sewed my clothing at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's the pick me up, took me, and there was no veils between the presence of my mother in my life, and there is when it comes to God. That's where Orion Mahemna comes in. The faith is there. Problem is that it's kind of peripheral. If you ask me, do I know this with absolute certainty that that there is a God and that He is the source of the blessed? Sure, I could say that, and I can mean it. So why are the results in the way that I act, or whatever it is, not lined up with the reality that I purport to acknowledge absolutely? And the answer is because it is the reality, but it is my peripheral reality. Should I have more awe for God than my boss? My boss says, come in Saturday. God says no. Why do I have more fear and awe of the boss than I have for God? Because the boss is right here. Yeah, so is God. But in my consciousness, I can't, as Paula, you put it just very simply, yeah, but I can't see him. I can't see him. I can't relate to him. Every metric by which something is defined in my life, I can't apply to God. I can't see him, I can't touch him, I can't feel him, I can't measure him, I can't. So it is perfectly understandable. Something that the Talmud acknowledges, something that King David acknowledges, something even that Moshe Rabbeinu acknowledges, is something that is very difficult to therefore just naturally have a
Rabbi,
relationship.
how
Yes.
does Moshe Rabbeinu acknowledge that for us it's different than for him?
In the fact that he's making this statement. He doesn't have to make this statement to himself. The statement itself is acknowledgement of the fact that it is not, in fact, just natural, or else, or else he wouldn't have to say it. No parent has to turn to their kid and say, but this piece of chocolate is just so yummy. Right? You don't have to sell a kid on a piece of chocolate. Right? the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu is making this statement is an acknowledgement that there is work to be done here.
That's it. That's the key. We've never spoken about this before, but I will bet everybody in this room that the love you have for Nachami today is not the love you had for Nachami when you first married her. I can say the same thing about Allie. It's because you need to work on it.
So
Moshe had a lot of workable time.
Moshe had a lot of workable time, but he also had a shortcut in this. We're not going to get that shortcut. We have to cultivate what, and I want to be careful about saying it because, of course, it's not. It's not. So I don't even want to label it as such, but I think it makes, to a certain degree, it makes a certain amount of sense. A long distance relationship with God. Of course, it's not a long distance relationship. But it is almost like a relationship over the phone or whatever it is. It's, in other words, for Moshe Rabbeinu, the relationship was bam, was visceral. For us, the relationship with Hashem is as much as we can develop it. And it's going to entirely take our effort. And our part of the effort is we are not alone in this effort. Part of this is that it is built into Yiddishkeit, that there will always be the Raya Mehem. There will always be that eyewitness, as it were, that makes it so much more real. Because when they share with you their experience, then it's as if you begin to see it also. And this is why we always have the Raya Mehem. The Moshe Rabbeinu are the equivalent of a Moshe Rabbeinu in every generation. How Hashem gives a little bit the shortcut. That for them, the journey that they have to walk is not necessarily to find God. God says, hi, hello, I'm right here. Their journey is to turn around and help others find. Moshe gets the shortcut. And that's what the Talmud's saying. Yes, Moshe got the shortcut. For him, this was easy. But because for him it was easy, it has therefore become easier for all of us. Moshe is not us. We are not Moshe. Hashem puts a Moshe in each generation. And then different calibers of Moshe. Not everybody's going to be the same. Certain people are going to feel the presence of God more viscerally than others, and their job is to help others start to find that as well. And that is why there are always, that is the reason that the Talmud says, Asay lecha Rav. Bring a Moshe into your life. You must. You must. Because otherwise this will not be easy. And it needs to be easier. It needs to be more natural. It needs to be more intuitive than it otherwise will be if you are doing this alone. Don't just read a report, get an eyewitness account. Because then it will become more real. God, that God that you are certain about that exists, the more you work on it, the more layers get removed between what you know is real and what you perceive as real. It's going to take work. It's going to take work, but it will be easier because for somebody out there in the world that you can access, it is easy. And being in their presence and hearing from them and seeing the way they conduct themselves. And I'll tell you, watching the Rebbe daven and be in the presence of God definitely helped me daven and be in the presence of God. That's why all the cynics and critics about the whole system of a Rebbe, the Rebbe dancing now, and they make a big joke out of it. Oh, the way the Rebbe dances, dance all the chassid. Miss a fundamental thing. None of those disciples of any great Rebbe, whatever it is, this are automatons. Let's say that, oh, all we want to do is you're missing it. In fact, they are perhaps the most critical, self-empowered people on the planet that are willing to say, I need to go on this journey for myself. And if this person is the way that I can take a leap forward in the journey I have to take, then I'm going to grab that opportunity. I have to be a fool not to. And it's built into Yiddishkeit. God says it will be easier for you because there will be the people who have put a special neshama, a different mission in life. Certain people have the role of being the ground troops, the ones on the ground who are engaged with the world and will change it with their hands firmly in the earth and refining it. And then there will be those that will share with them the insight and the vision and feed them, spoon feed them their own emunah, move it from their periphery into their internal organs. Do you know what the word shepherd literally means, both in Hebrew and in English? Not the one who protects the herd. Not the one who guides or drives the herd. Nope. Shep. What does shep mean in English? Shepherd.
That's not short for sheep.
Like chef, like
Feed. The one that feeds the herd. In English, in Hebrew as well, and in Yiddish, which is German, pastach, the pastach. In German, the past, the one who's giving repast, right? What is a repast? What's a repast?
A
It's a
meal.
meal. Pastach, the one who feeds the herd. Ro'eh is to provide sustenance.
Okay.
When the sheep are grazing, what do we call them? Ro'im. The sheep are ro'im at that time, when they are grazing. The primary role of the shepherd is to provide the sustenance for the herd. The ro'eh, to provide ro'eh ne'eman, the raya mehemna. The emunah is your emunah. You have it. You have that awareness of God. Every one of us has it. The problem is that it's on the periphery. It's not front and center. What's front and center is with my physical eyes is the physical world. God, it's not my fault. That's the way you created me. I see my boss more than I see you. I feel my physical headache more than I feel my spiritual ache. It's the way you made me, God. I'm far more cognizant of the physical material. And so therefore, although I know the truth of it, it is hard for me to have it viscerally enough that the automatic natural reaction, the easy reaction, would automatically be fear and awe. God says, I get it. I made you. I know that you're going to struggle with this. I don't have unrealistic expectations from you. I'm just telling you that I provided the resource. The one who is telling you that this is easy. Go turn to him and challenge him and say, Moshe, how easy? To which Moshe says, good question. Come, let's sit down and talk about it. That's the point. You're never expected to do this alone. Find the person that is the one that is closer in their oneness with God, and ask for their insight and ask for their experience, or just be in their space, and you cannot help but be affected by this. This is what David HaMelech really meant. He says, Achat sho'alti me'es Hashem. I'm not asking for one thing, God, and then coming back and tricking you with a whole list. This is not a bait and switch. I'm asking for your oneness, God. Achat is what sha'alti. That oneness, that I shouldn't see the world and you as separate things. That my consciousness and you are not two different things. It's one seamless truth. Achat sho'alti me'et Hashem. It's that oneness that I'm asking from you. I want that, the more of that in my life. And in this, there are being in the presence of one who has not necessarily perfected it. We don't have, you don't have to, but ones who are further along, no doubt that their insight, their mentorship, their guidance, etc., that is built into Yiddishkeit, that they have, that makes it easier. Geula Cohen, very well-known columnist of Yediot Achronot, I believe. Very well known, back in the 70s and 80s. Not religious, but found the Rebbe to be a particularly compelling individual. And so she oftentimes would come and visit and use the Rebbe as fodder for her articles. So a pragmatic lady.
Mhm.
She finished one of her articles in a very interesting way, and we'll finish on this point. She said she's, in the course of her years as an interviewer, as columnist, etc., she has met many great, wonderful, brilliant, one-of-a-kind individuals. But as a rule, being in their presence didn't make her any better at whatever they were particularly brilliant at. Being in the presence of one of the world's greatest doctors didn't make her any better at healing, automatically, by osmosis. Being with one of the world's greatest mathematicians did not make her any better at math. But she says, being in the room with somebody of true faith, you can't help but walk out believing just a little bit more. That's what she said was the most profound takeaway she had from the Rebbe. Being in the presence of a true believer, she said, you can't help but be affected and believe and walk away believing just a little bit more. And that is because it's not differently. If I don't have the math, I don't have the math skills. If I don't have the information to be a doctor, so this person just can't by osmosis. But when it's your faith, it's already your faith. It's there. Being in the presence of somebody helps you find your own faith. Helps you find that which you know and helps it become more internal, more off the periphery. It bubbles up to the surface just a little bit more. And it's not only in the presence, but obviously how much more so when you were studying with them, you're hearing from them, you're growing insight, etc. This is an important and a very practical takeaway from this week's Torah portion. Each and every one of us want to grow and be strengthened in our love of God, our fear of God, our devotion. And the Torah is giving you the roadmap. Find the Moshe in your neighborhood and spend a little bit more time with that individual. All right, everybody?
That's why we're here.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going myself to go spend some time with
Okay. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you,
Shabbat
Rabbi. Have a good
shalom.
Shabbos.
Great class. Good
Shabbat
job.
shalom.
Good
Shabbat shalom,
Shabbos.
everybody.
Thank you so
Shabbat
much.
shalom.
Yeah.
Absolutely.